Hey, everybody. Welcome to Talking Hockey Sense. My name is Chris Peters. It's episode 128 of the podcast, and we have a lot to get to, as we so often do, but it is the beginning of the hockey season. There are real hockey games being played. You can watch many of them on FloHockey, so definitely continue to do that. Also, we're really excited to have a great episode of this podcast for you today. We are going to be talking NHL Draft as the season is now underway across junior hockey. We've got college hockey right on the horizon. A lot of the European leagues have started, so there is a lot to get to. And to do that, I wanted to get some help. And so I do have a guest today, really excited to have Cam Robinson from Elite Prospects with us today. He is going to help me talk about this 2025 NHL Draft class. And there he is, ladies and gentlemen. He looks a little different than maybe you're used to seeing him, but there he is. Cam, welcome to Talking Hockey Sense for the first time. It is overdue, but I'm glad to have you with me.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris. I'm walking around a little bit lighter these days, and I'm excited to jump on and get this season rolling. Talk about the 25 class.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to talk about the class too, but before we get to that, I have to know what happened to the supply of endless bandanas. Where did they go? Do you still have them? Are you framing them? Are they going to be in a display case? When are you shipping them to the Hockey Hall of Fame?
Now, I'm waiting for that request. Yes, I should hold on to one or two just in case. Hey, no, they're gonna be put aside for now. We'll see. You know, maybe the hair wasn't long enough to donate to charity, but maybe the bandanas. Maybe that could be my gift to civilization. But no, we'll hold on to them for now, and maybe we might run the short hair for a bit here. But you never say never with that long hair. It's the flow, right?
Exactly. And we love flow at FloHockey. So, Cam, first of all, thanks a lot for coming on. And obviously, if you know Cam, make sure that you follow all of his work. You can find him at Elite Prospects, also EP Rinkside, which, of course, is the great content arm of Elite Prospects. And obviously, if you're in hockey, you are nonstop using Elite Prospects. And in my line of work, it's critical. So we'll give you that free little sales plug there. But let's get to the 2025 class, as we talked about. I mean, it's exciting. We've got games underway. I was just at the Fall Classic. We saw that, the CHL got underway over the weekend. Junior A across Canada got underway. The OJHL showcase is going on right now on FloHockey. There's a lot of different things that we're doing here on Flow with all these great leagues that'll be draft heavy. But college hockey also starts soon, and that is where we're going to start, because I think across the hockey landscape and across this NHL draft, a lot of the focus, at least at number one early on, has been on James Hagens. But I wonder for you, as we look at this class, we know there's a long way to go. There's a lot of season to go, with the entire season to go. What is it going to take for a James Hagens to go to wire to wire? And is he, in your mind, heading into the season as the number one prospect?
I think he has to be. I mean, his body of work is far superior than any other prospect in this class. Like head and shoulders, if you ask me. But we're not judging a player by his body of work up until his draft eligible season. And we're also not trying to judge really up through that draft eligible season. We're trying to see who's going to be the best player for their NHL careers, which is always kind of the sticking point with some people. But for James Hagens to go wire to wire as coming into the year and then to finish the year, he is, it's not going to be that much of an uphill battle for him because of the situation that he's about to slide into at Boston College. He's very likely to just replace Will Smith on that top line center next to Gabe Perreault, next to Ryan Leonard, seeing all that fun power play ice on an excellent team. Boston College could easily run down and go for a national championship again this year. They contended, they didn't make it last year. They've got another good crack at it. So to be able to produce big numbers, which I expect he'll do in the NCAA, in your draft year, like it seems to be a common theme here, right? We just saw Celebrini do it. The year before that, it was Fantilli. This year, it's going to be Hagens. But, he isn't Bedard. He isn't Celebrini. He's not a locked in, surefire, this is the guy at number one, and he's going to be stamp of approval, first line center, superstar center in the NHL. There are going to be contenders, and I'm sure we're going to talk about a whole handful of them right now.
Yeah, we sure are. And, I think particularly when it comes to James Hagens, you mentioned the situation that he's in. That's really one of the best things that you could ask for. Having Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault on either side of you, which is what we expect will be the line. On top of that, potentially playing between those two guys at the World Juniors. That's it's almost like a cheat code, but you still have to rise to the occasion. And I think that that's really what we're looking to see James Hagens do. And, I think you talked about Celebrini, Fantilli. I mean, they had a little bit more, of a different dynamic than James Hagens does. Hagens is not going to be the overly physical player that, Fantilli was always physical. He was always using his body. He doesn't have the two-way capabilities of a Macklin Celebrini, but he's got the high-end skill. He's got the hockey sense. He's got the playmaking ability. He's got the speed. All of these different things are going to come in there. But as you mentioned, there are going to be other contenders. And I'm going to actually skip ahead a little bit just because he's really in the news right now. And I want to talk about it because what a tremendous way to start a draft season. But Roger McQueen is probably the guy that NHL scouts are just begging to be amazing, right? He's 6'5". He is a big fella. And then in his first game of the season, or in his first weekend of the season, 4 goals, 6 points total over his first 2 games of the season, starting off the year with a 4-goal game in a 5-2 win over Moose Jaw. He plays for the Brandon Wheat Kings. I mean, what are your expectations for Big Roger McQueen? And we will always refer to him as Big Roger McQueen.
Big Raj. Yeah. I mean, when I was at the Holinka and I was just drooling over Matthew Schaefer, and I said it, I was like, I'm not saying he's second overall, but I'm saying if anyone's the front runner for second overall in my books, it's Matt Schaefer. And I immediately got a text from an NHL guy who I respect and I trust. And he said, if anyone's going to contend for first overall, it's Big Raj. And like you said, a 6'5" power pivot, right-handed power pivot. Like those guys are damn near unicorns, right? When they've got high-end skill. And so, he was a point a game player in the West last year. The thing is with him is that, yes, he is big, he is powerful, he's got great hands. He's had an excellent start. Like he looked terrific in those first 2 games, obviously the 4-goal game, but in the second game, not on the score sheet, but he was still looking very, very good. He is very old for this class, right? Like he is 10 and a half, 11 months older than Schaefer. He'll be turning 18 in a week. And Schaefer just turned 17. So it's 2 halves of the same coin sort of thing in what these 2 players can bring in Hagens and McQueen, because you have that pure power package, but it will leave a little bit on the skill side. But again, we're projecting what could this player be at 23, 24, 25, and it could be something really, really special. So teams definitely have some things to think about with him at that top spot.
Yeah, I was certainly, he got injured early in the under 18 Worlds last year where we were both at. And I was certainly bummed because I was looking forward to seeing what that was going to be. And then obviously he comes back, has a good Holinka, has a good start to his season. He's going to be a guy that I think scouts are really tracking. And, you look at how Caden Lindstrom and the different things that happened to him last year, obviously the injury troubles kind of changed the projection a little bit on him. He still went very high in the draft, but now you've got that same kind of, we got a big guy, we've got a guy with skill, not as much as Hagens, or probably maybe not even as much as Lindstrom really at the end of the day. But certainly, an immense talent. So he's going to be a guy that we're watching. But I do want to get back to the guy that you mentioned just a few minutes ago in Matthew Schaefer, because Bob McKenzie put his rankings out from TSN, which is many different scouts contributing to that list. And Matthew Schaefer was number 2 on that list. And so, you've got a defenseman who's ahead of Porter Martone, ahead of Anton Frendel, guys that have been 2 and 3 on a lot of lists. But I think coming out of the Holinka Gretzky Cup, coming out of how well he played in a lesser role, but still an important role at the under 18 Worlds, and coming out of an impressive rookie season where he went through a lot of personal adversity on top of everything else. I mean, there's a lot of talk about him being not just, the number 1 defenseman, but even, as you said, potentially number 1 overall. What were the things that you saw that made you think, well, this guy, he's got to be a potential number 1 candidate here?
He was so good. Like, for my money, he was the best player on Team Canada, and he's playing with Gavin McKenna. And McKenna, he was constantly looking for Schaefer on the ice. Like, you could see, like, he wanted to use him for his give and goes. He was always looking to feed him the puck instead of his line mates there, which was, Cameron Schmidt and whoever the revolving door was at the time, Reshny, and they had different players looking up there in the middle. But, he was extremely mobile. And we've seen that from him in club play too, but he was shiftier than I'd ever seen and more confident with the puck. And he was hammering these deep outlet passes. He was shimmy and shake and bake at the line and then dancing down and, driving in the net and slipping a little pass across the crease or trying to go cheddar on from a tough angle. Like, just these like high level, creative, intelligent plays, rushing back to get back into the play, lifting sticks. Like, he was hard defensively. To me, he was like the total package. And, he was so young. He was still 16, but just leading that team, right? Like, he just wins. Like, he just wins gold medals everywhere he goes. I'm very impressed with him, as an individual, seems really mature as well, intelligent, hardworking. He's been through some stuff, like you said, and that usually that builds some resiliency and some grit as a human. I think he's going to be a hell of a player. Now, obviously, the knock is coming out is that he's got mono, and that's going to impact his energy levels for some time, which is disappointing because maybe we won't get to see him really challenge for that top spot. But at the same time, any NHL team with like worth its salt is going to be like, oh, okay, great, we understand what this player could become, and now someone at 7 or 8 is going to get themselves a home run. They'll just say thank you very much. But I think teams are going to be smart enough, especially in this class, which is going to be a little light on elite defensemen, that even if he has a slow start, even if the counting stats aren't there because of that slow start, and we're looking at January, February, March, when he really kind of gets up to speed, that they're going to understand this guy's good enough to take top 3.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's absolute potential for him to be a superstar, and what we're seeing is him just scratching the surface. And you also mentioned, the age factor when we're talking about McQueen, and we're talking about a guy who is 10 days away from not being eligible for this draft class, and Schaefer, and age matters. I mean, we talk about this all the time, and the work that we do is that, it all starts really at the beginning of a player's hockey career when they're sorted into the age groups that they're going to be in, and players that are born later, like Schaefer, are going to have further to go developmentally, and that stays true through now. And so you mentioned the illness. He is dealing with mono. The expectation is it'll be a few weeks before we get a chance to actually see him, and maybe it will be even a few more until he's ready to play. It's a very unpredictable illness in terms of when a player is able to come back. But I also agree. I mean, the issue is here with this class, it's not the year to really be desperately seeking top end defensemen. And unless you're getting the very first one, and that's the one where you're like, okay, we got something here. And that's why he very well could go as high as number 1. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he goes that high. So going to be fascinating to watch him. I think he's a really intriguing player. But I do want to talk about 2 of the guys at the top of the list that we haven't really talked a lot about yet. 2 guys that I think are going to continue to contend and be legitimate threats to, James Hagens, Matthew Schaefer, Roger McQueen, whoever else. And that's Porter Martone and Anton Frundell. Now, Frundell injured. It doesn't sound like it's long-term. It doesn't sound like it's going to keep him out for much time. He'll be playing, professionally in Sweden. And then you've got Martone coming back for another year in the OHL. He's been a dominant force, captained Team USA or Team Canada rather at the Under-18 World Championship to a gold medal. Highly productive there. Has a real opportunity to play for Canada at the World Juniors. There's so many different things that he does well, and he does them well in a large, another large frame, which is important. So, between those 2 guys, based on what you've seen so far from them, and obviously we're not really counting this season as much because it's so young, but, where do you kind of handicap those 2? Where are they looking at, on your list at the moment, and kind of what are the things that you think might separate one from the other?
Yeah. So, I would have liked to put Frundell ahead because I think on like a pure skill offensive package, I think he does have the edge, but he's every tournament I go to, he's never there. Like he's always battling something, right? We missed him at the U18s. We missed him at the Holinka. Like he wasn't at the World Juniors, obviously, as a double underager last year. But it's just it's disappointing that he can't really get going outside of, the J20 that he torched last year. He is a weapon, there's no doubt about that. And, I have him right behind Porter Martone on my list. Right now, I've got him in kind of that. He could be as high as 2, maybe as low as 6 or 7 in kind of that spread to start the year. And Martone is similar. Porter, though, I'm a big fan of this kid. Like, how much fun was he at the U18s, right? Like, just off the ice, when we were in the scrums, he's got all the time for you. He's charismatic. He's funny, goofing around with the fellas, captain that team. I was, on the way home when we were leaving, they obviously hadn't gone to bed that night. They were up enjoying themselves after winning a world championship. And so I show up at the airport at 4 a.m. and there they are. They got the trophy. Porter gave it to me to hold. I'm on the flight with them, sitting behind him. Hilarious kid, just a great guy. I've got a lot of time for him. And as a hockey player, right? Like 6'3", power winger, has got great hands, leadership skills, can bang a little. So, another one that should be a pretty easy bet in the top 5. He's a winger. Where, you're stepping up against McQueen or Hagens or Schaefer. They're the more unique positional players, which usually bumps him up a little bit, but he's good enough that he's a top 5 kid unless something weird happens this year. But like you said, I think he has a very good chance of making that World Junior team. Like he's a bubble player right now. So if he has that strong start and then a good camp, he should be on that. And to make that as a draft eligible on Team Canada, that'll be a big feather in his cap to drive him through the rest of the year. So I really like that kid. And I'm rooting for him to maybe even sneak up there even higher into that 2-3 spot if he can have a really big year.
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible, totally within his capabilities. I mean, I think there's really good hockey sense there. He makes a lot of good decisions with the puck. I don't think he has the vision of a Hagens or, necessarily always has the power that we see that I'd like to see more from him. But at the same time, I really do think that this is a player that, again, scouts are looking at the physical tools that he has, and it's like, okay, please be good, and please have a good year. We need a guy like that. We need a guy that can be a more powerful player on our wing. And I think a lot of teams are still looking for size, especially as we've seen a lot of the top players under 6 foot with high skill. Having more guys with some of that size really helps in terms of building that championship caliber team. Now, the other thing that's interesting is, with Frundell, the injury thing is going to be a part of the conversation. And as you mentioned, he wasn't at under 18s because he was injured. He wasn't available for Holinka Gretzky. And then he goes to under 24 nations, and that's where he gets hurt. And so it's, again, like a summer tournament, it's an unfortunate thing. I think there's no doubt in my mind, as long as he's healthy, he's going to be on the U20 team. He'll play at the World Juniors. He's going to be on that stage. We could potentially, Hagens is very likely going to be USA's number 1 center. Martone has a chance to be there. You've got, Frundell with a chance to be there. So that's all going to be an opportunity to kind of see those guys in a level playing field. And obviously USA is playing Canada. Another fun fact about Martone, which I didn't realize until I was talking to James Hagens, they actually played a fair amount together in summer and spring leagues. And so there's a connection there between the two of them. They've been together. They're familiar with each other. They're friends. They're friendly with each other. And so, you've got that kind of competition. And that's one thing that I think maybe we underrate about James Hagens relative to the field. We see the size, the skill, the different things. He doesn't match them in size, but he outpaces them in skill. But I really do think in terms of his approach, his mentality, his competitiveness, his drive, it's as good as anybody's. And I think that's a common thread among players that are going to go first overall is they have that real belief in themselves that they should be the best and are among the best. And I don't think that he's threatened at all by the people that are around him, but that's what you would hope. You'd hope for that opportunity for him to seize that opportunity and be extremely, confident in what he can do. So that's what I think will be interesting. Another thing I wanted to mention before we, move on and maybe we'll talk a little bit about some of the rookies in NHL training camps too. But I want to talk about the goaltending situation here, because this is another area where, you've got some guys that are at least in the very early stages of this draft conversation are getting first round buzz. I don't want to necessarily talk so much about the goalies as it is the idea of first round goalies, Cam, if you don't mind. And I mean, neither of us are goaltending experts. We are not the guys that are going to be able to give you a real technical breakdown of these goalies. But what we can learn from our contacts and other things is, how teams feel about certain guys. But I also want to look at this, and I hope I'm not putting it on the spot. It's more, think about what it takes to build a championship team. How high on the list is a number one goalie? When I look at recent Stanley Cup champions and I see Aiden Hill, I see Darcy Kemper, I see, Jordan Binnington, I see some of these, these different players that didn't necessarily come through as top level, top talent draft guys. Now there is, Andrei Vasilevsky, the outlier, the guy that's won a couple and was a first round draft pick. But in a lot of cases, it's been very difficult for first round goaltenders to become a piece of a Stanley Cup champion or Stanley Cup contending team, even at some point. Any thoughts about that in terms of how that impacts the way that you think of the draft and how and the weight that you put on that position?
Yeah, absolutely. I have loads of thoughts on this because it's true. Like, it is very rare to see a first round goaltender then evolve through his career and become a superstar. It does happen. Obviously, Carey Price, going back further, Luongo, Marc-Andre Fleury, and these were like top 5 goaltender selections too, right? So it can happen. And you know what? If there is a Luongo or a Fleury or a Carey Price in a draft class, I'm like, more power to you. But then, you're kind of pushing into that, Ilya Samsonov, right? And then, the other side is Jake Ottinger, who has been a lead at times too, and looks like he could lead Dallas to the Cup. So you can find mix and match, but I've always been a big proponent of once day 2 kicks in, you're at pick 36 or whatever it is, and somebody takes the best goalie. And everyone's like, here we go. Here comes the goalie run. And then you see 4 goalies go in the next 10 picks. And that's all fine and well, because that's the second round, especially like if a team has, if they have multiple first round picks and they want to use that second one on a goaltender, I have a little more time and space for that, because you're absolutely right. Like, what are the chances that the best goaltender from a draft class is actually the first one selected? Like, I'd love to go through the numbers and see that, because like, I always make the joke that the best one's probably some Finnish kid that I've never heard of, who's going to come over at 23, he's 6'6", and he's Pekka, right? Like, it's just, these are the guys that end up evolving into these superstars, because it's such like, it's easier to enter the league as a forward than it is a defenseman. And it is miles easier to enter the league as a skater than a goaltender, right? Like, the developmental curve for netminders is just so vast. It's like driving across the prairies. You don't see a hill forever. Like, you're just driving straight and hoping things break right for you. Eventually you're watching your dog run away for 5 days. And so even though these kids are coming in and they're much more polished than they used to be, and we do see some goaltenders start to push. Devin Levi, guys that coming out of college and they're 21, 22, and they're like, I'm ready for an NHL job, and then he steps into Buffalo and they're like, you're our starter, and they're like, oh wait, you're not ready, because you're not 23, 24, and you haven't had all this pro experience and gone through all the heartaches and ups and downs and stopped letting pucks squeeze through your armpit. So yeah, it's, there are a couple goaltenders in this class. Like, I mean, Ravensburgen, I think he just got measured at over 6'5", 6'5 and a half, something like that, 6'5 and a quarter in PG, playing for the Cougars. He's good. Like, I've seen him live several times as a, draft -1. He is very, very good. I'm really excited to see what he's going to be. But, would I feel comfortable taking him at 14? No, probably not. Right. Like, it's just, I think that there's going to be an easier assessment, an easier path to success for a player at that spot. You want to talk to me at 25? I might have some time for you there. But overall, yeah, it's such a crapshoot with netminders that, again, like you mentioned, we aren't the gurus. We aren't the whisperers here. So you get one of those in your organization who really believes, and you listen to him, and I won't question him.
Yeah, and I think, teams have definitely invested in that position. They've invested in putting more guys into that role where they are evaluating goalies. It's not, they're not necessarily sometimes they are the goaltending coach as well, but in a lot of cases they're simply evaluating goalies and doing some of the player development stuff with their goaltenders that are already in the mix. But I think, I look at last year, and last year it was a weak goalie year, or at least we thought it was a weak goalie year. We felt like, it's not a great year. Then 5 go in the second round, and so it's just kind of like a wild There's still obviously a race to get these players. But again, I think when it comes to probabilities, odds, thinking about the best use of that asset, I think in a lot of cases you might be able to find those project players later. But we see every year there's a run on goalies, and I think it could begin in the 20s this year if Ravensburgen is there. He's off to another good start this year. He had a great playoffs in the WHL with good numbers. So that's going to be the guy, and he has a chance to play for Canada. He was in Canada's camp for the World Juniors. There's always a chance that he continues to exceed expectations and gets that starting job. So there's a lot of different factors at play. But again, I think it's an interesting conversation, and it's one that I think teams are continuing to have is, should we even start a discussion about a first round goalie? That is certainly one of the things. Before we get out of here and stop talking about the 2025 class, I did want to just quickly note this because we do have a number of draft eligibles in college hockey this year. Hagens, we've already talked about ad nauseum. Sasha Boumediene at Boston University, Logan Hensler at Wisconsin, Cullen Potter at Arizona State, Dakota Rayon Mullen at Michigan, and then Shane Van Shaggy at Michigan State are among the draft eligible players. I think in terms of, Hagens is obviously going to be a high pick. We think Logan Hensler will be a fairly high pick. Sasha Boumediene had a nice rookie year with Youngstown last year. The guy that I'm fascinated by, I've talked about him on the podcast before. We don't have to really belabor it again, but Cullen Potter, accelerating. He's going to play at Arizona State playing in the NCHC this year. Any general thoughts about any of these guys in college? We will have Cullen Potter on FloHockey. They are opening their season on the road at Air Force. We'll have both those games October 4th and 5th. But any of those guys, that you're keeping an eye on, that you're excited to see? I mean, we've already touched on Hagens, but any of those other guys that you're intrigued by?
Potter's interesting. I'm pretty sure he's a Texas kid, and then was a Michigan State commit, right, for a minute there, and then shifted to AZ because I don't think they wanted to accelerate him at State. So it's an interesting route, right, to a non-traditional, feeder, you would call Arizona State. So I'm curious to see how he goes. He looked good for the 17s last year at the program. Boumediene, I didn't love what I saw at the Holinka. I'm really hoping that he can, because, like you said, in the USHL last year, he was pretty good as a D-1. So I will be interested to see how he does. Hensler, the same thing, like at the Fall Classic last year that we were at, like I was looking at this kid and I was like, this is the best defenseman on the team. And he's a draft -1. Yeah. And then, as the season kind of wore on, he was caught and surpassed by a few of those players. So when we were at the U18s in Finland, he didn't really stand out nearly as much. And so now we're looking, did he take a big step over the summer, and how is he going to acclimate to, college hockey? Big task ahead, playing on the blue line at that level. So, I'm definitely curious to see how he can adjust and adapt and see if he can thrive, because I do think that there's a very realistic chance that he's the second defenseman off the board if he can have himself a strong season. So for sure, those are kind of the ones that I'm really keying in on. And the other ones we've got to look at them through the program and at the internationally and stuff like that. And we kind of know what they're going to be, and it's not high.
Yeah. No, not high picks. I think they both have a chance to be, to be drafted and everything. But yeah, but it's just strange how every year it seems like we have more and more players to track that are in the NCAA, given that we have an 18-year-old draft still. So it's interesting nonetheless. All right. So lots to talk about. We'll talk about the 2025 draft throughout the season and everything else. But I do want to talk to you about NHL training camps are going on right now. Anything intriguing, any players, rookies, guys that, it's time to take a step. I know you're very involved in kind of, the fantasy and different things that you kind of put out there for people. What are some of the young guys in the NHL that you're keeping a pretty close eye on as this week progresses and next week progresses in NHL training camps?
So looking at some of the young guys that like already established themselves as NHLers but didn't pop last year, like obviously we're expecting Zach Benson, Leo Carlson, Fantilli to take that next step. Bedard, naturally, like I expect him to be a near superstar. But like coming into that next class, right? Like Will Smith stepping out. How's San Jose going to handle having him and Celebrini, right? Like is because it's going to be an adjustment. Yeah, I know Smith led the nation in points last year, but I do think it's going to be an adjustment for him, especially because San Jose is going to be a bad team, right? They tried to insulate with getting to Foley and a couple of these other pieces, but they're going to be bad, and it's going to be tough, and it's going to be a slog. And I'm not worried about Celebrini. I am a little concerned about Will Smith in that situation. With a couple of the older guys, like I'm really interested to see how like Liam Ugrin, he got some minutes last year at the end of the season with Minnesota. Like, can he stick long-term this year? Lekiramäki in Vancouver, like he's been skating on a line with Pettersson and DeBrusk all camp. I guess they're going to wheel him out there and give him some power play time and let him run the preseason. And they think that he has a viable chance to take a top 6 role in Vancouver at 20. Super interested to see that. My boy Frankie Nazar in Chicago, really, really high-end player with loads and loads of skill, a little bit undersized, but like speed, dynamic, and like, can he support that Bedard line? Can he be that second wave of offense coming up? It's a big ask again for a player who's just coming up and just coming out. So those are a few names that jump to mind. Anyways, Easton Cowan, does he get minutes in Toronto? Like, he was dominant in the O last year, that massive point streak, really great in the playoffs too. One more, Zane Parekh. I don't think they'll keep him, but like Calgary, they could keep him, right? Like, if he's been that good in camp and he is that talented. And Lane Hudson, I'll throw one more in just because we got another American for you. Hudson. I am not sad that I kept Lane Hudson in my keeper league the last couple of years, just stashed away, because I knew this was coming, and it was coming sooner than people probably thought. That he's going to get a look at running that top power play, and there's going to be hiccups, and he's going to get run through the end wall at even strength, and they're going to have to shelter him. But my goodness, the kid he's got the juice.
He does. And is that trademarked, by the way? You got to do it. The juice. He's got the juice. Cam Robinson.
Some shirts going.
The juice. And I'll tell you what, like, all those guys, really good examples. Another guy that I'm kind of really intrigued by is Bradley Nadeau in Carolina. They've not been shy about giving guys opportunities early. That's a guy they really believe in. I personally was surprised that he came out and signed right away. Only, his brother is at Maine. He didn't necessarily dominate, but he is an incredibly skilled player with a lot of talent. That's a guy I'll be watching. Hudson's been just building a highlight reel throughout the entire preseason, and every step of the way, it's like, will he be able to do it in this level? Will he be able to do it in this level? He always finds a way. So I'm intrigued by that. I think the goaltending is going to be really interesting. Minnesota is going to have a decision to make in the near future about what the long-term plan is with Jesper Wallstedt. I mean, I think he'll play a fair amount in the AHL this year, just because they have Gustafsson and Fleury, but they're going to get him NHL games, no question about that. And then you look at Askarov. Is he going to be the guy? Can he be the full-time guy in San Jose? That with this, for the same reasons that Will Smith, that we're concerned about the potential for struggle there. Are you going to put your young goaltender that you just traded away some assets for in that position? Whereas, and the thing is will the Barracuda be good enough as well? Like those other things, they have a lot of guys that are, too young for the AHL at the moment, or, elsewhere. So there's a lot of different things that'll come into play. I think San Jose as a whole is going to be really interesting to watch, but we're going to continue to have these conversations. We're definitely going to have you on again. I mean, I have a feeling people are going to be seeing a lot more of you around these parts here. But Cam, this is, I have such tremendous respect for you, and obviously, we do things differently, and I think that's great. We have different opinions, and I'm sure that at points, debates will happen. But today, I think we're all excited. It's the beginning of a new season. It's like, how can you be harsh on anybody at this point? Because there are so many possibilities. But let's tell everybody where they can find your work and maybe some of the things you got cooking right now.
Yeah, for sure. And yes, in the future, let's, we got to get like religion or politics involved or something, so we can just start butting heads real quick, right? Like the old days. And one thing I just saw last night, someone pointed out on our Slack channel there at EP that Rimouski put Nadeau on their roster for the regular season. And so I quickly texted someone in the Hurricanes organization. I was like, they're dreaming, right? And he just LOL. He's like, yeah, they're dreaming. Like that kid, they're going to give him every chance to be a second line winger this year. And if he's not, he's going to be a first line winger in Chicago, right? Like, I am all aboard the Nadeau train. So another thing we agree on, unfortunately. As far as pumping work there, yeah, obviously at EP Ringside, all our written content there. The fantasy guide just recently came out, which I spearhead, and this year I had a little help from Michael Clifford and Victor Nuno, which is great. I didn't have to write it all by myself this year. They do terrific work, and then all the great stuff we're doing at Ringside. You get to see me all over social media and the elite prospect stuff, the pop-ups. I'm sorry you have to see my face so often, everybody. And then you can hit me up at hockey_Robinson on Twitter.
Well, Cam, thanks a lot for hopping on here. It's great to get a kind of a primer for what's to come in this exciting season. I'm sure we'll be talking again very soon. And yeah, man, have a great season. I'm pumped for it. I know you are as well. I think we're gonna the best is yet to come here in 2025. So we'll be chatting with you soon.
Sounds good, and we'll see you on the road.
All right, that is Cam Robinson. Definitely follow his work at EP Ringside on the Elite Prospects editorial arm, and certainly we will be chatting with him throughout the season. You may have noticed last week that I said, hey, this might be it for the show. Well, we're working on some new things coming up here on our podcast, and so while we're still working on those things, I'm going to keep talking to you on this podcast because there's too much happening that we don't want to leave it all out there and undiscussed. And one of the things I want to talk about with you guys now is where I just was, and that's the USHL Fall Classic. That was where I spent the last several days, got a chance to see every team in the USHL. I didn't get a chance to watch every single game start to finish because there was some overlap, but I got to see a lot of the players across the league. And there's a number of high-end draft prospects that will be in the league this year. I think there's also going to be a number of young players that are still future draft picks that could even be the bigger stars in the USHL this season. And I thought it was just a tremendous event. We had every game for you on FloHockey. We also had a number of free streams. So if you go to the FloHockey YouTube page, you'll be able to find all of the games that we streamed for free in archive form. So you can go back and watch Team USA NTDP's 5-2 win over the Waterloo Blackhawks, or you can watch Adam Benak's USHL debut. Those are available on the FloHockey YouTube page, so make sure you head over there if you want to see those games. There's also a number of highlights that you can find there, and we've got some great original content coming off of that as well. We spent an entire day with the Des Moines Buccaneers, which has one of the better draft prospects in the USHL this season, and Ben Keevan. We spent time with them going behind the scenes, unprecedented access. Our cameraman was on the bench with the team, not off to the side of the bench, on the bench, moving around, dodging coaches, getting that inside access that is so unprecedented. And we cannot wait to share that with you in the coming weeks. But let's get back to what happened on the ice. And the thing that really is the big takeaway for me is that the 16-year-old rookies in the USHL, and it sounds crazy to talk about players that young, but these guys come into this league ready to play a role. And we saw Macklin Celebrini do it 2 years ago, came into the league, was the best player in the league at 16 years old. I don't know if we'll see guys that are the best players in the league, but we're going to have some significant impact players throughout the entire league. And a couple of the guys that really stood out right away, the first night I got a chance to see Ilya Morozov from the Tri-City Storm. Big player out of Russia, has size, he has that physical strength. He's committed to Miami University currently. He is a guy that I think is going to be a massive star in the USHL at a young age. The maturity, the skating ability, the strength, the skill. He showed a lot in his first weekend in the league. And I think when it is a tough jump to go from wherever you were in under 18, under 16, 16 only hockey, whatever, to the USHL. It's a massive jump, and not a lot of players are able to make that seamlessly. I thought Morozov was one of the guys that did. Tynan Lawrence, same thing. He was an impact player for the Muskegon Lumberjacks. You still see his youth, but he's a guy, played in Canada, has an opportunity to come here, and was a very exciting signing within this league. And so they're excited about what he's going to bring to the table. He did score his first USHL goal over the weekend. Also, one of the first goals of the entire season was scored by Jack Hextall. He plays for the Youngstown Phantoms. He was playing on a line with Adam Benák, and also was on their top power play. And so there's a lot of belief in Jack Hextall, the Chicago area product, that he is going to be a significant player for the Youngstown Phantoms immediately. I mean, we can keep going. The list goes on. Adam Valentini for Chicago had a very strong first game. So there's a lot to like about this team. And I think that there's a lot to like about where they are going as a group. So in terms of the young players in this league, I should have said not the team, but this group of young players in the league. Coming out of the Fall Classic, the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders, Sioux City Musketeers, and Sioux Falls Stampede all came away with all 4 possible points that they needed. They won both games. Every team plays 2 games, and all but one team came away with at least 1 point in the standings, where there were a lot of close games. I think parity is going to be a real story here. As far as 2025 draft eligible prospects, guys that we're going to see in the USHL this season, 2 of the guys that stood out the most to me, Adam Benák on the first night, all eyes were on him. He was getting tons of interview requests. He was, the scouts were all over it. He has 2 assists in his first game, including 1 on the overtime game winner. Also set up Jack Hextall's first USHL goal with just an absolutely beautiful pass right through the Royal Road to get an easy goal for Hextall, and the vision and the creativity are all there. I think it'll take Benák a little bit of time to adjust to the pace of the USHL. There were a few times where he probably thought he had a little more time than he did. I think a lot of players that come over from Europe get a bit of a rude awakening at how fast this game is at the USHL level, because it moves at a different pace, and certainly there's a physicality element to it. Not that there isn't where they came from, but I think it's just a little more pronounced. Also, you're dealing with a lot more of the older prospects, guys that are in their second or third year in the league and have known all the tricks. So it makes things like that a little more difficult. But I really, really liked Adam Benák's first game. I didn't have a chance to watch his second game, but did get a chance to see him. I did get a chance to watch Ben Keevan quite a bit from Des Moines. And I knew about the player because he had 57 points last season as a rookie. Impressive numbers at 16 years old in the USHL. Arizona State commit, born and raised in California. Very intriguing player, high-end skill. Very quick, not big. He's about 5'11", and he's going to need to tack on some muscle, but in a high-end shot and high-end hockey sense, I think he is going to be a player to keep a very close eye on. I don't think that necessarily he looks like a first-round pick, but I think he's a very early day 2 pick. Now, that could change as he gets stronger, as his numbers improve, all those things. He did miss the third period of the final game, got a little banged up. It doesn't sound like it's too serious, so hopefully he's not out for an extended period. But as long as he's healthy, I think that's a player to keep a very close eye on. I was very impressed with what I saw from him over the 2 days. And obviously, we also got a chance to get to know him a little bit following the Des Moines Buccaneers around. And I think that that's a player that is going to have an impact in the USHL this season. So those are some names to keep in mind for the NHL draft. Moving on, there's a lot coming up on FloHockey. We've been talking about it for weeks. We're going to continue to talk about it. Very soon on October 4th, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Atlantic Hockey America Conference. We have all of their home non-conference games and each game in the conference. So coming soon on FloHockey, you are going to see Arizona State against Air Force Academy. That is going to be an absolutely great series to start us off this season. We've got Mercyhurst in action on opening weekend as well. A number of other games. We'll also have Penn State versus Alaska Fairbanks. We have all of Alaska Fairbanks's home games on. So the Nanooks are back, and we are excited to share those games with you. And pretty soon, we've been talking about everything that's happening at the NHL level. Training camps we're starting to see players get sent down. And that brings us to October 11th. And also before that, we'll have some AHL preseason games, but October 11th is opening night in the AHL, our inaugural season on FloHockey. Very excited for that. Every single AHL game is on FloHockey. It'll be live and on demand. You will definitely want to be signed up. Make sure you get that annual subscription so that you can get the AHL. The following week, it'll be the start of the ECHL and SPHL. So we've got the 2 affiliated farm leagues in the AHL and the ECHL, all teams connected to an NHL franchise. We also have the SPHL, where you'll see players called up from that league from time to time, to the ECHL, to the AHL. So you've got 3 rungs of the ladder of professional hockey in the United States right here on FloHockey. Make sure you are subscribed. One subscription gets you access to every single league and also everything we have to offer on FloSports and the FloSports app. So make sure that that is something you have done already. Meanwhile, the USHL is underway. All of Canada junior hockey is underway or about to be underway. The USPHL is on the horizon as well. They have their showcases going right now. And we're going to also have a few other announcements coming in the very near future about some of the other things that we're going to have for you this season. So I'm telling you right now, if you haven't done it yet, go ahead and subscribe. And just know, in addition to all of that great content that you get, subscriptions do help support what we do on the content side. We are absolutely a business that is trying to get more and more hockey fans onto our site. It allows us to do more and more things like the Des Moines All Access piece that you're going to get to see, like this podcast, like all the written content that we're able to do, and all of the things that we have to do to provide the best level of content for you. So just know that when you do subscribe, it helps us out too on the content side, and we will continue working our butts off to make sure that you guys have something that you're really excited about. And it's not just the live games. It'll also be some really, really tremendous content, a lot more on the horizon, so much to come. And what an exciting time it is to be here at FloHockey. And it is a very exciting time to be subscribed to FloHockey as well. As a reminder, make sure you're watching our podcast on the FloSports app, on FloHockey.tv, on YouTube. You can also catch us on the audio version anywhere you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, the list goes on and on. Make sure you are subscribed. We'll have more details about the new things coming as I continue to tease about this podcast. We'll keep this rolling until the new one is ready to go. And once that is, we are going to have so much fun. We're going to be talking prospects. We're going to be talking about the AHL. We're going to be talking about other Flow leagues, college hockey, everything. It's all on the table. So that is going to do it for this week's episode of Talking Hockey Sense. Huge thanks to Cam Robinson for joining me as a guest. Huge thanks to Josh for producing, and a massive, massive thank you to all of you who have been listening. We cannot wait to get this season going. Let's have fun out there, everybody. Have a great season. That's going to do it for today's episode. I'm Chris Peters. We'll catch you next time.